and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. Bitter cold temperatures are rolling into the Chicago area, canceling school for many students.
We are working hard to bring the Chicago Bears to the Hoosier State.
The latest in the Chicago Bears' attempt to find a new home. A herd of bison make a prairie in Kane County their new home, healing nature and creating cultural connection.
We've come here, we've answered the call, but a few years later, we're getting deported.
And an exhibition explores the influence of Mexican railroad workers in Chicago. First off tonight, dangerously cold weather tomorrow has canceled classes for Chicago public school students, and CPS buildings will be closed to the public. The district says it's been closely monitoring the forecast in collaboration with the city's Office of Emergency Management and Communications to make the decision that the temperatures forecast for tomorrow are too dangerous for students and staff to travel to school. CPS says there will be no remote learning tomorrow, and all extracurricular activities are also canceled. Many suburban districts are also canceling classes Friday as well, or shifting to remote learning. For a list of those closures, please visit our website. And just how cold will it get? First, brutal, then a snowstorm, maybe. Starting tonight, temps take a nosedive with the coldest hitting from 3 a.m. to noon tomorrow. All of Northeast Illinois will wake up to sub-zero degrees Friday morning. Forecasters expect temperatures won't reach above zero until Saturday, and even then, not by much. A high between 5 and 11 degrees Saturday afternoon. And meteorologists are keeping an eye on a large snowstorm expected to hit central and eastern U.S. this weekend, with the potential for accumulating snow in northern Illinois and northwest Indiana Saturday night through Sunday. Meanwhile, for more on warming centers in Chicago and Cook County, visit our website. A federal jury has acquitted a 37-year-old carpenter of charges that he placed a $10,000 bounty on the life of Border Patrol Commander Greg Bavino. This first criminal trial to come out of the Chicago area immigration enforcement effort proved to be short. With just 2 days of statements and testimony from 4 witnesses, the jury deliberated for just 3 hours. Federal prosecutors say Juan Espinoza Martinez used Snapchat to tell his brother and a friend that he'd pay, quote, $10K if you take him down, along with a picture of Bavino. That friend turned out to be a government informant. But Espinoza Martinez's defense attorney argued he sent the message as neighborhood gossip, never following up on those exchanges, and only had a few dollars in his bank account. A Joliet family is suing the city's police department, accusing them of an unlawful search of a 12-year-old girl during a traffic stop. The family's attorney says the 12-year-old was in the car with her sister when they were pulled over for a routine traffic stop. They say she was ordered out of the car and then patted down by a male officer. The attorney adds the search included contact with her upper thigh and groin area and was captured on the officer's body-worn camera.
So the cops would have been aware?
They were told. And the sergeant who comes on the scene later says in disbelief to the officer, "You searched a 12-year-old?" I mean, that's on the tape.
The attorney says the Joliet Police Department later acknowledged that the search violated department policy and constitutional standards and issued discipline to the officer involved. State officials are investigating whether the owner of a South Shore apartment building tipped off immigration agents in an effort to force out Black and Latino residents. The Illinois Department of Human Rights is looking into whether the 3 firms that own and manage the building committed housing discrimination. The complex was the site of that high-profile immigration raid back in September. 37 people were arrested, but no one was ever charged, according to a ProPublica report. In a statement, Governor J.B. Pritzker says, quote, "State law prohibits discrimination, and that includes aiding or abetting conduct intended to interfere with housing and civil rights." Representatives of the 3 firms could not be reached for comment. Bally's temporary casino rang up just $15 million in new tax revenue for Chicago last year. That's down slightly from 2024 and lower than what city officials had originally projected. Bally's is asking state officials to allow it to continue operating that temporary casino for an additional year until September 2027. Meanwhile, the company is building a permanent casino in River West, hoping to open by the end of the year. Up next, will the Chicago Bears stay in Chicago? That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
The Bears season officially ended last Sunday in that overtime thriller against the Rams, but the saga of the team's future home is still playing out. Bears leadership and Illinois lawmakers have butted heads over a proposed stadium project in Arlington Heights. As a result, the team says it's considering a number of sites in Northwest Indiana, a prospect many Indiana lawmakers and officials seem to be relishing. Here's Indiana Governor Mike Braun.
And with our strong business environment, it's not surprising that another organization has noticed that Indiana is open for business, the Chicago Bears. We are working hard to bring the Chicago Bears to the Hoosier State so they can really see what a great place is to have a business. We'll work hard to do it. Let's get it across the finish line.
Joining us are Illinois State Representative Mary Beth Canty, who represents part of the northwest suburbs, including Arlington Heights, and via Zoom, Mark Gannis, president and co-founder of sports business consulting firm Sports Corp. We also invited a representative of the Chicago Bears as well as sponsors of that Indiana legislation to join us, but they declined or did not respond. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Mark Gannis, so the Indiana Senate Appropriations Committee, they unanimously passed a bill today that would help finance the construction of a new NFL stadium in Indiana. The Bears seemed receptive to that legislation, issuing in a statement, quote, "We appreciate the leadership and responsiveness of Governor Braun and Indiana lawmakers in advancing a framework that allows these conversations to move forward productively." Mark Gannis, does moving to Indiana make more financial sense for the Bears?
Well, as it stands right now, there is no deal in Arlington Heights, or the city of Chicago for that matter. So the Bears may not have an alternative if the state of Illinois, if Springfield does not act and provide certainty that the Bears need to have the ability to build a stadium in Arlington Heights. So as it stands right now, they may not have a choice. Now, if you're asking me if they have a choice, where will they go? There we have to see what it is that Indiana puts forward and what it is that Illinois puts forward. Clearly, the Bears have said they would prefer to be in Arlington Heights. They've been working on this very hard for a very long time. It's really the legislators and the political side in Springfield that hasn't really moved very quickly. And that is what has opened the door for Indiana to step up and create a competitive environment.
So last week, Gary, Indiana, they released some renderings of 3 potential stadium sites, 1 near Hard Rock Casino in northern Indiana and 2 near the water at Buffington Harbor and Miller Beach. What are some of the pros and cons of a Bears move to any of those proposed sites in Gary?
All the sites there and in Hammond that have been talked about are all quite close to downtown Chicago. They're near the Skyway. They all have rail access that are close to them with train stations in downtown Chicago. They're about 25 miles from downtown Chicago. It's in a different direction than where many of the Bears fans are, which are more towards the north and northwest suburbs, but it is relatively close. That's very attractive. But again, I want to come back to a critical point. There is no deal yet in Arlington Heights for the Bears to say that's an option. That's what is missing right now. And that's what I think everyone in Arlington Heights, I hope everyone in Cook County and Chicago is hoping that Springfield actually steps up and puts on the table.
Okay, let's talk about that because we have the state representative who represents Arlington Heights right here. And the Bears had previously expressed interest in the stadium site in Arlington Heights, but they say there's been a lack of legislative partnership, and that's their reason for remaining open to a place like Indiana. You've been working, of course, to keep the Bears in Illinois. Can Illinois match anything that Indiana lawmakers have put on the table so far?
So I think to Mark's point, so first off, thank you for having me and letting Mark and I talk about this topic. You know, there isn't anything really meaningful on the table yet in Indiana. I think what we've seen here in Illinois is a desire to make sure that our local communities have the tools that they need in order to attract businesses and do this economic development. But we always want to make sure we're doing right by the people who live here, by the taxpayers. And so we want to get this policy correct. We want it to be transparent. We want the tool itself to be transparent and make sure that the locals have that ability to bring businesses into their communities or to keep them within their communities.
You introduced legislation back in February of 25 that would give the Bears more flexibility on property taxes on a new stadium. Tell us what that bill would do.
Yeah, so thank you for asking me that. It's really not just a Bears bill, and I want to be really clear about that, going back to getting the policy right and putting the control back in the hands of the locals. What we're doing is creating an opportunity for local governing bodies, right? Your municipalities, your school districts, et cetera, to decide together if they believe that they've got a piece of property that is ripe to be a mega development site. That would enable them to then start to enter into a negotiation with the developer if certain criteria are met, where they could create an incentive agreement that could look like a flat fee on your property taxes or something else, but it would provide certainty, not just for the developer, but also for the local communities. That gives your taxing bodies real concrete dollars that they can budget against, making it easier on your local taxpayers.
And what would you say the status is of that legislation? Will it come back up in this session?
I think that it will. A lot of lawmakers throughout the state see the value in a program like this, an ability like this, not just in Arlington Heights, not just in Chicago, but really all over the state. This can be meaningful. Whether the Bears are able to make their case once we pass it, if they're able to make their case to Arlington Heights and the surrounding communities, that would be wonderful. But Rockford could also make a case for battery storage. Cairo could make a case for some other type of development in their communities as well. We want to make sure we're creating those jobs and that economic opportunity.
Mark Gannis, we brought up property taxes, and that has been, a sticking point in the Bears negotiation process. The team is committed to invest $2 billion in the site and has asked the state to contribute an additional $895 million for surrounding infrastructure. The team saying they want something to the effect of property tax certainty. What kind of taxes would they be looking to pay compared to what would be expected to pay typically on a property like the one that could be under development?
Well, first thing you should know is virtually no teams in the NFL pay any net property taxes for their stadium. That's one thing that people need to understand. Sports teams typically do not pay property taxes. That's because most stadiums are owned by a governmental authority, because most stadiums are paid for in whole or in part by the government itself. So the Bears are saying, we'll pay for the whole thing. And you want us to pay property taxes as well. Okay, we'll pay that, but we need to know what they are or we can't finance the project. It's a very reasonable ask on the part of the Bears. Now, you look at what the property was generating when it was Arlington Park Racetrack. I'm not sure what that number was. Was it about three? I think she will know better than I, but about $3 or $4 million a year. Was what it was generating in property taxes for the area. That's always a negotiation, but the idea is it needs to have some certainty associated with it so that the totality of the project can be financed. And let me add one more thing here, and that is that there's been some discussion by, for example, the editorial page of the Chicago Tribune, that somebody who owns a bungalow on the northwest side of Chicago does not have property tax certainty. Well, that's fine, and that's true, but there are thousands of other bungalows that have that you can do a comparable analysis. There are no other stadiums.
Because we are out of time, you do know how much was that other property?
I do. So when
in 10 seconds.
Yes, it was generating $3 million a year in property taxes and $850,000 a year in food and beverage tax. Right now, it is generating $3.6 million a year just in property taxes as vacant land. SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles pays about $8.8 million a year in property taxes.
And that's where we'll have to leave it, because whether or not what's happening in Indiana will prove to be leverage for the Bears team and the ownership is something that we'll have to wait and find out. Mark Gannis, State Representative Mary Beth Canty, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Coming up, a herd of bison find their way back to a Kane County prairie. Our Nick Blumberg and guests explain next.
Bison are back in Kane County after a 200-year hiatus. That's thanks to a partnership between the county's Forest Preserve District and Chicago's American Indian Center. The reestablished presence of the 6 humpbacked bovines has both ecological and cultural significance. Our Patty Wetley joins us now with more, along with American Indian Center President Jessica Walks First, who's an enrolled member of the Menominee Tribe of Wisconsin. Thank you both for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
An exciting story. All right, so Patty, this homecoming, this is 3 years in the making. How did it get started?
Well, there are quite a few conservation herds in Illinois, including at places like Medawin National Tallgrass Prairie. Land managers like the Forest Preserve District, this is kind of the next step in a natural progression for grassland restoration. And they had actually gone to the folks of Cook County and gotten a funding referendum passed, so this is kind of a promise that they had made. Although they were originally thinking of this exclusively from an ecosystem restoration standpoint, I will say they said they saw Ken Burns' American Buffalo documentary and realized they needed to press pause on their project, rethink it, and reach out to members of the Native American community and make sure that they were involved in bringing the bison back.
That's very cool to see. I froze my feet off doing a story at Nachusa many years ago, so it's exciting to see the development of this.
I knew about freezing the day we brought him in. It was pretty cold.
Well, so Jessica, the American Indian Center is now, taking stewardship of the herd.
Yes.
I know a lot of indigenous nations in the area have a strong connection to bison, and of course, their near extinction coinciding with a lot of violence against Native Americans. What does it mean to be a part of their revival?
Oh, God, I'll get emotional about this, but it is literally, like, even me as a Menominee person, we've just reclaimed that piece of our history. Yeah. So as an Indigenous person living in the city, struggling to be connected to my culture, being able to do this for our community is life-changing. Yeah. It is emotional, it's impactful, it's intentional, and it's something I never dreamed we would be able to do for our community, and we're doing it, and it's so amazing.
Yeah, it's really powerful to see, so thank you for sharing that with us. Patty, these bisons, they're considered a keystone species.
Yes.
What kind of value do they bring to the prairie?
Well, a keystone species is kind of the one that all things kind of cascade from. So people like to say, the prairie evolved with bison, bison evolved with the prairie, and without bison, a prairie isn't really a prairie. And so from their wallowing habits to the beetles that prefer to eat their dung, for lack of a better word, to the birds that might, grab some of their hair to build nests, all these other things come back with the bison. So it'll be fascinating, and that's part of what the American Indian Center is going to be helping monitor.
Yes.
What kind of changes are happening on the prairie there in Kane County.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So our community engagement coordinator, Denise Okuma, she's actually working on a community science program that will, again, monitor the changes, monitor how, the prairie changes with their presence and how they adapt to the prairie. So it's, basically we're trying to understand their habits as well. It's part of our process of reconnecting is learning with them. And so Denise will be in charge of a lot of that programming that happens, not only just for our community members, members, but for everybody to come out and learn with us.
Yeah, so there's, both sort of the citizen scientist aspect of it, and then
Yes.
there's also, as you mentioned, the cultural traditions, helping,
Yes.
Native folks in an urban environment, reconnect with some of the cultural traditions about bison. How do you hope to help Indigenous community members, bond with these animals?
Well, there's a lot of hopes there, but I mean, and the gist of it is, like, again, I've said this before, we live in a concrete jungle where we can't go out and put our feet on the prairie, and we don't get the opportunities to connect with our plant and animal relatives. So by, stewarding this herd, this gives us opportunity to provide those experiences for our community members and to help them connect with their culture. Because again, living far away from our reservations, there's a lot of disconnection that happens there. So this is one major step towards helping community members feel connected, whether their tribe has a buffalo history or not. Really, I mean, we all identify with our, buffalo relatives, no matter what tribe we come from. So this is just a good way to put it into practice and create those connections.
Very exciting to see this project become a reality, and I'm sure there's
So
going to be much
beautiful.
more in the years to come.
Absolutely.
Patty Wetley, Jessica Walks First, thank you both.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
And you can read more about the bison on our website. It's all at WTTW.com/news.
Part of Chicago's identity is rooted in its railroads, but an important part of that history has long gone untold. In the early 1900s, Mexican railroad workers helped shape the city's infrastructure. Our reporter, Joanna Hernandez, went to the National Museum of Mexican Art in Pilsen to learn more.
Literally 100 years ago, if a Mexican came to Chicago, you weren't taking an airplane and you weren't taking a highway because it didn't exist. You were literally taking the train, and when you landed in Chicago at Union Station or any of the stations downtown, the job that most readily available was a railroad job, or a steel job, or the stockyards.
Meet Ismael Cuevas, co-creator of Rieles y Raíces. The exhibition takes a closer look at a time Mexican workers were in high demand, and the roots they planted still shape these communities today.
This is an example of a newspaper, the Burlington Railroad, going to Mexico and asking Mexican workers to come work in Chicago and across the Midwest.
A collection of photos reveals the lives families built in Chicago and its suburbs. Census records help trace some of those families to boxcar settlements along the tracks.
We were able to find Mexicans living along boxcar communities right by Midway Airport, in Inglewood. We found boxcar communities near Blue Island, even as far south as, for example, on 75th and Western in that big railroad yard.
Maps, photographs, and personal finds show how communities carry their culture with them.
For example, they built a chapel in that boxcar community, and that image of La Virgen de Guadalupe is the same image that was hanging inside of that boxcar 100 years ago in Aurora, Illinois.
It's a passion project, he says, led him to uncover a personal family connection.
My grandpa told me that I had a great uncle who worked in the railroad, and he was based out of California. So I'm thinking I was going to find a document from California. So I ended up finding this document, and it says that he was a section laborer in 1926 to 1932 in the maintenance of way department in Ottawa, Illinois. So literally about an hour away from here, I had an uncle who was living here with his family.
The exhibit explores World War II and how a massive labor shortage sparked the Bracero program, bringing millions of Mexican workers to farms and railroads across the country.
This is literally a magazine from 1943. And you have literally in the magazine, this is a bilingual magazine that they chose for this edition, it says Soldados del Ferrocarril, soldiers of the railroad. So while we have soldiers abroad fighting the Nazis, we have soldiers internally making sure that our supplies were getting delivered.
You said this was a time where America embraced the Mexican community.
Mexicans were being embraced during this era because they needed to fulfill that labor shortage. Now, what is really drastic and almost hypocritical is that a few years later, when we get to after the wartime period, we go into the 1950s, and that's when we have Operation Wetback.
A photo shows ICE agents deporting Mexicans along the same railroad tracks Cuevas says Mexican laborers helped build.
And we're literally seeing a moment in history where history is repeating itself. Deportation campaigns happened in the 1930s, deportation campaigns happened in the 1950s, and they're happening today. And it's really important for us to see that we We literally have examples of traqueros, of these Mexican railroad workers in Chicago who had bought homes, and a few years later they're dealing with getting deported and are writing letters to their loved ones, checking up if the house is still standing, if they're still be able to are paying the mortgage of the house.
Cuevas hopes uncovering this piece of history inspires others.
This is not just about railroads. I hope that, youth come here, boys and girls of all kinds, and get inspired to do digging in of their history, and someday they'll have an exhibit.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
The exhibition is free at the National Museum of Mexican Art in Pilsen. We're back to wrap things up right after this.
Reflecting the people and perspectives that make up our communities, this story is part of Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices.
And that's our show for this Thursday night. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 7 for the Week in Review. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm, righting the heaviest wrongs for more than 40 years.